Good evening, and welcome to the Institute of Politics Speaker Series event, Is RFK Jr. Right About Our Food System? My name is Camila Levy, and I am a third-year student in the college from Washington, D.C., double majoring in public policy and economics. At the IOP, I'm involved in the Pritzker Fellows Program as a team lead for Senator Jon Tester, one of our panelists tonight. I'm particularly excited for this event because I've spent the last few weeks learning from Senator Tester about crucial policies and bills that facilitate food distribution in the United States as his team lead. Additionally, as somebody who struggles with food intolerances and allergies, I'm excited to learn from our guest about the current administration's controversial plans to tackle all the intricacies involving our food system. Tonight, we are joined by an outstanding group of panelists. Senator Jon Tester is a former senator from Montana. First elected to Congress in 2006, Senator Tester served on the Veterans Affairs, Homeland Security, Indian Affairs, and Banking and Appropriations committees, all while maintaining a full-time job working on his organic farm in Big Sandy, Montana. His first-hand experience as a farmer informed his policy perspectives during his tenure in the Senate, where he was known for advocating on behalf of rural communities and agricultural interests. Dr. Marion Nestle is the Paulette Goddard Professor of Nutrition, Food Sciences, and Public Health Emerita at NYU. Through her expertise in nutrition and public health, she's among the most influential forces in forming national food policy and campaigning for food education in America. Brian Choi is CEO and managing partner at the Food Institute. An expert in finance and business, he focuses on providing food industry news, data, and market trends to many top food and beverage companies. Moderating our discussion today is New York Times food industry reporter Julie Creswell. Her work focuses on the business side of food, discussing how companies navigate supply chain challenges, how consumers are affected by food inflation, and the pandemic's impact on how and where food is consumed. Some quick housekeeping before we begin. First, please silence your cell phones. Second, when it is time for the Q&A, a microphone will be placed in the audience, and so please line up and remember that priority for the first questions will go to students. Following the event tonight, students can drop by the IOP to join the IOP Student Advisory Board, UCHI Votes, and UChicago Student Government from 7 to 8 p.m. to meet the undergraduate student government candidates for next year. Ask the candidates any questions and prepare to make an informed vote. Dinner will be served along with the discussion. Finally, please make sure to check up upcoming IOP events, including fires, floods, and F-ups, the ugly politics of disaster, which will take place in Ida Noyes Hall on Tuesday, April 15th at 5:30 p.m. For students interested in the Spring Policy Challenge, DIY Doge, there will be an info session on April 11th at 1 p.m. on Zoom. The winning team of 2 to 5 students will each be awarded a cash prize and have their proposal forwarded to Senate's Doge caucus. Finally, applications for IOP student leadership positions included paid IOP internships are open on the website and due April 14th. All of this and more is on the IOP's website. Now please join me in welcoming to the stage Senator Jon Tester, Dr. Marion Nestle, Brian Choi, and Julie Creswell.
I love that music.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We've got such a fabulous panel, and I want to say hello to all of the friends and people that are watching us. Okay, it's all my family, sorry, on YouTube today. I'm very excited to be here, and I think we've got a great group of people that, and you know, we all know that the Trump administration has given us nothing to talk about right now, so I guess we'll just stare at the walls for a few minutes. But that being said, you know, I'd like to first talk with Marion, and I have known each other for more than 20 years. She wrote a book more than 20 years ago called Food Politics that talked about the problems in our food system, the conflicts of interest, how bad Fruit Loops were. Well before RFK and the Make America Healthy Again movement. So Marion, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what is the movement right about right now?
Oh, it's right about how Americans are unhealthy. Our life expectancy is lower than that of most other highly developed countries. 75% of American adults are overweight or obese. Kids are heavy, and that puts everybody at risk of chronic diseases. And to hear RFK Jr. talk about the need to do something about chronic diseases, It's the first time I've heard anybody at that level of government talk about these things, and he sounds just like me. I can't get over it. Well, and it's hard to put that together with some of the other things he's saying.
Right. So, Jon.
Can I jump in on that?
Please, please.
Well, I mean, I really think that the fact that we're taking a look at our food system from a standpoint of the government taking a look at our food system is a positive thing. I mean, this is stuff we put in our bodies. It's something we should never take for granted. It's something we should continually be analyzing to determine if it's the right stuff for us to eat and if it's good for us. And I think that awareness, is good for society in general, because it might get to some of the things you talked about in your book.
So, if we all kind of agree our food system is a problem, why hasn't it been addressed? Why haven't we fixed? We've had many administrations, I guess Michelle Obama, it comes to my mind with sort of her efforts to help school children, Americans eat healthier. Why are we still here? Why are we still not in a better place? Jon.
Because this is my opinion, okay? So you know, I don't think our food system is a total wreck. I think there are parts of our food system that we need to address. For example, I'm in production agriculture. I raise not commodities, but food, and we ought to start calling food food instead of acting like it's tin and steel and everything else. It's food. And I put a lot of time into making sure that I'm raising the best crop that I can raise and that I'm doing the best for the soil health so that that crop has nutrients in it. I expect the same from the processors when they get it. I expect them to be adding value, to adding nutrition to the food, not beating it to death like we do wheat and making white flour, which is not as good as the product that I send to the mill. And I think we should take a look at that kind of stuff. And by the way, the consumers drive the bus on all this, I believe, and the consumer has been saying for some time that, the whiter the bread, the sooner you're dead, so we're not going to eat it. And I think that's why we're seeing movements back into whole grains like my grandparents used to do. And so that's what I would say. I would say we need to look at the systems. We need to look at the stuff that's being marketed and ask yourself, are Fruit Loops good for you? Are Twinkies good for you? I would recommend that if you want to reduce your lifespan, that's a good way to do it. So let's talk about post crops and grains and the things and how we keep that food value that was put in by the folks in production agriculture so that the consumer gets the full benefit. We can get into research and development on that kind of stuff later on in the program if you'd like.
Can I just make one comment? You mentioned Michelle Obama, and I can't resist. Because the first thing that President Trump did when he appointed RFK Jr. as Secretary of Health and Human Services was to talk about the industrial food complex. I kind of couldn't believe it. And to appoint a commission to make the Make America Healthy Again Commission, which has been assigned the task of investigating the status of the health of American children and producing a report in 100 days, which is now a month and a half off, and then an action plan in 180 days. And I thought this was pretty terrific. And then I thought, wait a minute, I'm having a deja vu. I've seen this before. And in 2010, that's exactly what the Obama administration did. They had the task force on reducing childhood obesity and in one lifetime, and that was exactly what that report did. And what happened to that report? The Republicans killed it. They said it was nanny state. They said you couldn't do it. They made it impossible to do almost anything. And now the Republicans have taken it on. Okay, I want to see it done. I don't care who does it. I want to see it done. I just hope it will be.
Brian?
If I can just add, I've worked on Wall Street for about 15 years, both from an investment banking and a private equity perspective. And the way America looks at food businesses and prioritizes kind of profit and efficiency much more than the health of our children. That's where it starts. And it's about policies and government putting restrictions in place so that when food and beverage manufacturers and farmers and they're thinking about, okay, what they're putting into food. It's not about, okay, how can I drive the bottom line, but also incentivizing them to provide better quality and better ingredients so that families can eat better, right? So that's on one hand. I would also say from an education perspective, we haven't done enough to educate families about what is good. It's shocking to me that the appointment of RFK has put that much attention on health. Why didn't this happen 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, right? Why has it taken this long? And so I think it's really about education as well. We're not educating the consumer, we're not educating the voters on what is really important, and I think media has a lot to do with that. Not the New York Times, though.
Marion, is there a country, a place that does this better than the United States in terms of regulation of the food system? Is it better in Europe? Is it better in Canada? Is it better in Australia?
Well, what I'm interested in is what are the efforts that are being made to try to prevent obesity and the chronic diseases for which obesity is a risk factor. And countries in Latin America are looking at what's happening in the United States and saying, we're already seeing type 2 diabetes prevalence rise enormously. We can't afford it. We don't have a healthcare system that can take care of it. We want to prevent it. And so they are looking at various ways to try to prevent it. And they started with taxes on sugar-sweetened beverages. Then they got warning labels on food products that were high in salt, sugar, and fat. I'm just back from a trip to Mexico, and it's an astounding experience to go to a supermarket there because half the products have warning labels on them, and they're big. They're these big black warning labels. And Mexico has just passed a law that you can't sell ultra-processed foods in schools. It's going to be very interesting to see whether they can implement that one because they don't have a school lunch program. And I think each of these countries is trying in every way that it can to try to get public health measures in place, even though there's an enormous opposition from the food industry, which stands to lose by this. So I don't know, it's very difficult. The politics are tough on this.
Right. I mean, speaking of the food industry, I think a lot about, it was about a decade ago that there was a movement by the food industry to try to remove, let's say, artificial colors, right?
Ah, yes.
You had Kraft, I think, start using paprika and maybe turmeric instead of yellow dye, orange 40, whatever the color scheme was. You had a number of cereal companies, including, I think, Kellogg's and General Mills, that tried taking the colors out of their brightly neon-colored cereals. And what happened was sales tanked. Sales didn't go well, and you had a reversal.
It's your fault.
So do we think the American consumer is more open now to healthier food choices? Has something happened? And I have this conversation a lot with post-COVID. Are Americans more aware of their health and what they're putting in? Is the younger generation more aware of what they're putting into their bodies? Or if you still go into parts of America that are low income, don't have a lot of money, the highly processed foods tend to be the least expensive, the most accessible, and children still at the end of the day really like bright colored stars and rainbows and unicorns in their cereal.
Who's that for? Looking at me.
I'll start with you, Jon.
So, well, I mean, I think there's a couple things at play here. I think that we've we've had a cheap food policy in this country for my entire life, and I think if you combine that cheap food policy with people who are struggling to make ends meet, I think it costs a little more to have good food on the table. It's a fact of life. Long term, it'll probably save you some money in medical bills. I believe that to be absolutely true, by the way. And so I think it's how people can look at it. And I think it's easier for people who have disposable income to say, you know what, I'm going to spend that in a place that maybe sells organic food or sells food from regenerative agriculture or whatever. But not a lot of people, there are not enough people, let's put it that way, they're in that boat to be able to make those kind of decisions that will, would really benefit themselves and their families over the long haul. And so that's what I would say. I would say that if you're eating food because of its artificial color, Jesus, man, you got your priorities in the wrong spot, okay? Now, if they're putting red dye in your meat to cover up the amount of fat that's in it, that ought to be illegal anyway, truthfully, because you should be able to look at. I had a good friend of mine who's from Toronto. Every time you go through a food line, he used to drive me crazy. This is a long time ago before I understood a lot of stuff. And he used to smell all the food before he'd take it. He used to smell it. And I'd say, what the hell are you doing? And he says, if it doesn't smell good, I'm not eating it. And there's some truth to that too. But I mean, people have to pay attention to that kind of stuff. But oftentimes they might have the best interest in mind, but not have the wallet to be able to handle it.
If I can just add, so I'm Korean, and I traveled to Japan and Korea. And from a cultural perspective, the Asian countries value, going back to Senator Tester's, they value their health a lot more than Americans. And it goes from the government down to the family unit level, and it's ingrained in the way people live life. What I've noticed is that in America, the culture has really kind of shifted to hyper-industrialization, and the new generation that's coming up, they don't have those same type of cultural values. When you have companies like PepsiCo, and I'm a sucker for. I love the taste of those red hot, those Cheetos. What do you call it? One of the ones the flaming hot. That's my favorite snack. But I know every time I buy one of those bags, I'm probably decreasing my life expectancy by a couple of months. But so the accessibility, and it's cheap. I can go down to my local Wawa. I can buy a bag of chips for $1.50. Or I can spend 3 hours, probably like 2 hours going to the grocery store, buying produce and cooking I just don't want, sometimes I just don't want the hassle, right? And so it's relearning those cultural values. I was watching a video in the 1960s of the young men and women of America. And my gosh, it's like they were super fit. Everyone looked healthy. I'm like, oh my goodness. It was almost like a super breed of, we've lost those values, and so it's about relearning, and I think it's not just government. It's everyone has to come together to kind of reinstitute these values and prioritize health more so than profits.
So Marion, how do we talk people into eating potatoes and not potato chips?
I don't think you talk people into doing it. You make potatoes available, cheaper, fun to eat. You teach people how to cook. You teach people how to grow food. You do it with kids. I've been to lots of schools that have gardens. It's miraculous. I mean, you see kids eating salads and liking them and being interested in it and taking them home and teaching their families and complaining that the food in school is better than what they get at home. I mean, I've seen this. It's not all schools. It's the schools that have people in them who really care about these issues. You know, I mean, I'm very interested in what's going on in politics right now, and because of the food issues. And the idea that RFK's first priority was to get the colored dyes out of American foods is interesting because, you know, I said I'm just back from quite a bit of traveling, and there are lots of countries that have gotten rid of these dyes, and they use vegetable dyes instead. Whether that's any better or not, we can argue about. I think the colored dyes should be gone. I'm greatly in favor of getting rid of them. I just don't think it's the most important issue. And it troubles me that there's so much focus being placed on it, that there's the MAHA movement is focused on food colors. I want the MAHA movement focused on getting people to eat healthfully and making it possible for people to eat healthfully. And that means looking at where the subsidies go and changing the farm bill to, I can't even talk about it with a straight face, changing the farm bill to a bill that is focused on food for people and producing a healthier America than producing profits for corn and soybean producers. Sorry.
No,
Jon, you got some.
I don't raise corn or soybeans, but it's okay.
And he's organic.
The only other thing I would add to that is that if on the ingredients list there are, it contains things that you can't pronounce, we ought not have that in the food. I mean, if you're looking at the ingredients list and it has shit in it that, quite frankly, you can't pronounce what it is, what's it doing in our food?
I don't know. I was worried about the video that RFK Jr. did where he couldn't pronounce riboflavin. That's a
Well, there are some exceptions.
oh dear.
Okay.
Oh dear. Otherwise, I totally agree.
Yeah.
I wanted to make one point, and I think, you know, what I'm so excited about speaking to students here is that you all have a voice. And the role that media, and especially social media, has on shaping ideas and habits, it's so powerful. And I'll bring up Vani Hari as an example.
I know.
She is not a politician, but she is an activist. She's so passionate about, you know, those ingredients, getting rid of ingredients. And she has helped to spur a movement to the point where the management teams of some of the largest food and beverage companies are basically bowing to her because she holds so much influence. And she's built a groundswell of support because so many people are following her. What she's been able to do is quite remarkable over just over 2-3 year period. And in many cases, what she's doing on the social activism and she's getting companies to react in months because the impact, they are seeing what she's putting out there and it's impacting consumer behavior and it's impacting the bottom line, right? And so if more people are vocal about what they're seeing and especially as it comes to, you know, eating healthy and having a healthier lifestyle, these companies will be forced to respond, you know? And if that happens and you have great policy, you know, I think that we're in a stage now that we can really make, you know, a lot of sweeping changes to our health system. So I just wanted to bring that up.
But as somebody who talks to executives at food companies, you know, at the end of the day, it is about revenues, sales of the product, and profit margins.
Correct.
And when I talk to a few of these CEOs or people, it's more expensive to use fruit, watermelon juice, strawberry juice, beet juice,
Right.
carrot juice to color your cereals or your breakfast bars or your drinks. And you're not even going to achieve the same level of shades or colors that may draw in that consumer and make him want to eat the chips a bit more.
And it won't turn the milk green.
And it won't turn the milk green. And it won't turn the milk green. And then so that'll affect their bottom lines.
Right.
So are companies really going to be super excited to start to reformulate?
No.
Or are they going to try to, is this a waiting game? Are they going to try to wait Trump and this administration out?
I think it's twofold. I think they're trying to wait it out and do the minimal possible to keep margins, the same.
Right.
Right. And a lot of it, as you know, is rhetoric. They'll maybe hire a task force internally within companies and say, hey, right. We have a task force to find healthier alternatives.
Right.
And they'll wait it out.
Right. Because I think when was it West Virginia, right, that put the ban on artificial colors, like the Consumer Brands Association, which is the lobbying group for the food industry, came out and said, you're reducing choice and going to increase costs, right? Like that's kind of their twofold attack on this. So I guess the question is, will they try to tackle the Trump administration and RFK Jr. on these sorts of policies?
We're still talking about colors.
And we'll move on, I promise, because there's lots.
We're still talking about colors, and I don't think it's the most important issue. The most important issue is calories, if you're concerned about obesity and chronic disease. And that's an eat less message. Eating less is very bad for business. And so the question for me is RFK Jr. willing to take on the food industry? I don't see how he possibly can. There's no precedent for the Trump administration taking on industries of any kind, let alone the food industry. He's going to take on the food industry. I don't think he's going to do that. So I don't know what's going to happen. Kennedy is talking about getting ultra-processed foods out of schools. Well, that's the Department of Agriculture's purview anyway. He's talking about getting chemicals out of the food supply. That's the EPA's purview. I don't know whether it's talk or whether there's action. I'm waiting to see the action. But my prediction would be the color additives will change.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's going to happen.
And like we've already seen some changes at the margin, right? So even food service operators, so Steak and Shake. Right, so with the focus on seed oils, they've started to use beef tallow, right?
Oh dear.
Right, so again, like we're seeing some changes at the margin.
A reaction.
Other CPG companies.
Is that a good change?
I was going to say that just kills you slower, or
yeah, and again, even the use of the BHT, right, and consumer packaged goods, right? So. Those elements are starting to come out of manufactured products. So again, we're seeing some changes at the margin. I think there's a lot. It's going to take a lot more time.
Some of them make more sense than others.
Yes.
Marion, how do you feel about seed oils?
It's got 120 calories per tablespoon. You got to eat it in moderation.
Okay. Jon?
I would just say that I think taking on the food companies is a hard task. When I was in the state legislature, I had a number of bills dealing with genetically modified grains, and I won't throw the company under the bus, but they came after me really hard personally, and it wasn't the greatest example of lobbying, but the bottom line is they got enough people to vote against their own interests on this issue that I wasn't able to move it. They are powerful. They're a powerful lobby that uses information the best of their ability to try to stop things that I think are in the best interest for people in production agriculture and in the best interest for the consumer, but that's just my opinion.
But does it seem right now that the Trump administration, whether it's food policy, whether it's tariffs, whether it's DOGE and cuts, that some of the typical lobbying efforts in Washington, D.C., that the lobbying machine in Washington, D.C. is a little off its tracks right now, or a little uncertain in terms of like who to get to, who's got the power, who's got the ear, how to get the structure, policies moving in the direction they want? Does it seem that things are a little chaotic right now?
Well, I don't know that if it's the lobbying for Congress doesn't exist right now. They've ceded all their power to the executive branch. There's no need anybody even talking to them because they don't exist, and that's a fact. Up and down the line, I don't care what the issue is, whether it's food or defense or whatever it is. They have not made their voices heard. They are not a co-equal branch of government right now, and they need to get off their butts and get some things done, and then the food industry can go lobby them. But it's a waste of time right now.
Right, right. Highly processed foods. That is definitely on RFK Jr. and MAHA's agenda. You know, Marion, what does that mean? Are highly processed foods good, bad for you? What do you think of this topic?
Yeah, the word is ultra-processed.
Ultra, thank you.
And this is a relatively new term in the nutrition area. It was invented by a professor of public health at the University of São Paulo in Brazil in 2009. And what he did was to divide foods into 4 categories: unprocessed or minimally processed, category 1. Category 2 is processed culinary ingredients, fat, sugar, salt, cheese, things you cook with. And then the 3rd category is processed foods, foods that have been frozen, that have been pre-cooked, that have been processed in some way, but are still real foods. Those are all foods. In contrast, there's ultra-processed foods which are described as industrially produced, designed to be extremely profitable, to replace the foods that are real foods, that they don't look anything like the foods they're designed to replace. They're designed to be irresistibly delicious, if not addictive. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with the word addictive here, but a lot of people feel that they're addicted to these things, and you can't make them in home kitchens. That's the operating definition. If you can make it in your home kitchen, it's not ultra-processed, because it's ultra-processed. You don't have the machinery or you don't have the ingredients. And the best examples are probably corn on the cob, unprocessed, canned corn is processed, Doritos are ultra-processed. So the point of all this is that once the definition was made, then researchers could go and look at lots and lots and lots of dietary intake studies and divide people up as to how much ultra-processed foods they ate. And those studies, and there are now a couple of thousand of them, show that people who eat a lot of ultra-processed foods take in more calories, have more obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, certain kinds of cancers, overall mortality, they're sicker in general. And those are observational studies, so that means you can't say that these things cause these problems. But then there is one really well-controlled clinical trial that was done at NIH that showed that if you locked people up in a locked ward where they can't lie or cheat about what they're eating, and they're fed different kinds of defined diets and monitored very carefully so they can't lie or cheat, the people who ate the ultra-processed diet took in 500 calories a day more than when they were eating the relatively unprocessed diet. 500 calories is huge. Yeah. It's just enormous. It's just a phenomenal result. And one of the really interesting things about that study was that the investigator didn't believe it. He did the study because he thought the idea of ultra-processing was so stupid that he wanted to prove it false. And he was floored by the result. So there's something about these foods, he's trying to figure out why, but there's something about these foods that makes people eat more. And that's really all you need to know about it. So from a public health standpoint, the obvious advice is to eat less of ultra-processed foods. The only problem with that is that those are the most profitable products on supermarket shelves. And so and remember, eating less is bad for business. And the food industry is under huge pressure right now.
Right.
Not only from concerns about ultra-processed foods, but also because of the new GLP-1 drugs that make people not want to eat junk food, preferentially. They don't want to eat ultra-processed foods. And then you have inflation, which is making the cost of everything more expensive. And on top of that, you've got RFK Jr. It's a tough time.
Should ultra-processed foods be banned?
Banned?
John? Yeah.
I like them.
Regulated?
No.
Warning stickers?
Warnings.
Warnings.
You want to encourage people to eat less, not none. I mean, we all have our favorites.
Right. But John,
Mine is ice cream.
but do people need warning stickers, John, to be told what not
I
to?
don't think it'd hurt. I'm not a Bannon kind of guy myself on any of it, but I think consumer education is what's really important here.
Right.
And I think it applies across all the areas we've been talking about so
Right.
far. Is if you've got a consumer that doesn't take food for granted, that actually does their research in a similar way they would to applying for a job,
Right.
they'd be much more educated in what's good for them and what's not.
Right.
And they'd buy accordingly too, I believe.
Right. Brian?
I think labels have a huge impact on consumer behavior. I was just, earlier today I was giving a webinar, and we were talking about the growth in the non or no low alcohol movement. And as many of us know, earlier in January, the Surgeon General came up with a recommendation to actually put labels linking alcohol directly with multiple types of cancer. When you actually look at kind of the impact of labels, one of the examples I brought up is in 1965, when cigarette smoking was really kind of like, everyone was it was a 45% of the population was actually smoking cigarettes in 1965. And then when you look at from 1965 to today, it was a gradual decline. Now we're roughly on average about 8-9%, right? I'm not saying that one label was solely responsible for that decline, but I think that consumer awareness and education helped significantly lower the prevalence of cigarette smoking. So in a similar way, I do think ultra-processed foods, I would recommend, ultra-processed foods to have some type of label. And I think that will impact consumer behavior in a big way.
So what is the industry argument against this? Is it slippery slope? What the definition is, what's included in that? Is it taking away consumer choice? How does the industry battle any sort of effort to label or deem ultra-processed foods as bad for you?
Well, as far as I can tell, the industry hates the concept. And their argument is it's poorly defined, it excludes nutritious foods. They only give 3 examples of the nutritious foods that are, and that's commercial whole wheat breads that have lots of additives, commercial yogurts that have lots of sugar, and plant-based meats. We can argue about those. Those are 3. Those are conditionally ultra-processed. They could go either way depending on, well, not the plant-based meats. Those are ultra-processed. But they say that it excludes nutrients, and it's a concept that has to do with processing, not nutrients. So there are a lot of nutritionists who don't like it either, because they think it excludes nutrients. But what's been interesting to me is the enormous pushback against the concept. Paper after paper after paper coming out from food industry representatives of one kind or another arguing that the concept has no meaning.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Sure. From a regulatory standpoint, as the FDA, one of the things that RFK is talking about is taking a look at how rulemaking is done with substances that are generally regarded as safe, GRAS. Talk to us a little bit, explain to us what that has allowed the industry to do and what changes could come that would benefit consumers from
Well,
that?
again, this seems to me to be a marginal issue.
Okay.
There are thousands of additives in the food supply, most of them unpronounceable. And the FDA decided in 1938, and again 20 years later, that there were so many of them and it didn't have the staff to deal with them, that what it would do would be to turn the decisions about safety over to the companies that were using these additives. And what the companies had to do was to put together a committee, and the committee would review the data on the additive, and the committee would decide whether the additive was generally recognized as safe or not, and if it was, it could go into the food supply. And so, but this was a voluntary system. So the companies either could or could not do this. Many of them did, and they send the FDA these letters. The FDA, somebody at the FDA takes a look at them and says it has no further questions, and then the additive is essentially approved. But the FDA is not doing any of its own research into whether these additives are safe. But the FDA is an under-resourced agency.
Right.
It's going to be even more under-resourced with, with what, 3,500 employees fired in the last couple of weeks. And so it's not clear to me who's going to fix this. RFK Jr. has said that he wants to close the GRAS loophole, which is the loophole that allows companies to make their own decisions about this. But it's unclear to me how that's going to happen. And is that, I mean, we have a Congress that has given the FDA more and more and more mandates over the last 30 years with not very much more money to take care of them. And so it's an enormously under-resourced and understaffed agency. Its science board has been complaining about that for decades. And so it's very unclear to me how this problem is going to be solved, or how much of its effort the FDA should be spending on food additives when it's got microbial food safety to deal with.
Look, let's be honest. It's two competing things here. He wants to get rid of that loophole, which, by the way, he's right on.
He's absolutely right.
And yet they're going to remove all the people because DOJ says they've got to be removed. There is no way in hell they'll do this. They can say, yeah, we're going to do this, and people like me and you and probably most of the people in this room will say, that's the right thing to be doing. But it'll never happen.
It's not going to happen.
You've got to have the manpower to take care of the problem. Otherwise, the problem will never be taken care of.
Marion, if you had all the money, all the funding in the world, what would you fund inside the FDA to make the food system healthier?
Oh, a much better labeling system. And I want to take care of food safety. I'm very concerned about the FDA's inability to inspect imported foods. Although with the tariffs, maybe we won't have it.
Less of an issue.
Maybe that's a solved problem. The FDA inspects 1 or 2% of the food supply. Maybe that may be an overestimation.
So is this issues like the cinnamon that got into the applesauce packets? Is that what you're concerned about?
No, I'm actually concerned about bacteria.
Okay.
I'm concerned about E. coli and salmonella and listeria. And if you don't inspect the factories that are producing these things, the factories tend to get...
Sloppy.
He said it. He said it. They tend to get very sloppy. In fact, there's a whole term for this. It's called the culture of food safety, and what you want. And we have all the laws we need to produce safe food. They're not very well coordinated because some are FDA and some are USDA, as if USDA, which does animals, FDA does everything else, as if animals had nothing to do with contaminating vegetables. Vegetables are a big source because they're contaminated by animal waste. They grow vegetables in Arizona right next to CAFOs, where they're raising thousands of animals. And the FDA needs to be inspecting these places. The FDA has the mandate and the law to be able to go to farms, visit them, and make the farms clean up. But if it doesn't have the staff to be able to do that, it's not going to do it. It's not doing it enough now. It's certainly not going to be doing it if it's got all these staff cuts. So this is why everybody is fussing so much about the staff cuts. They can't do their job if they don't have the staff.
Besides the cuts, how is this administration looking at science?
Oh dear.
Go ahead.
Well, it's firing people from NIH. It's cutting grants to faculty at universities. It's cutting off in the middle really important studies that are going to answer really important questions about how you treat type 2 diabetes, for example. That's one of the ones that's just shocking to me, because that study was being managed through Columbia, and Columbia is being punished. NIH, they're cleaning out NIH faculty. Some of my favorite researchers, I've been told, have lost their jobs, although that hasn't been announced publicly yet. Faculty at universities are not getting grants. Student stipends have been cut off. So universities are saying they're not going to take any doctoral students next year. So the doctoral supply chain is now shut off. I mean, I don't understand it. I really don't.
I think from a production agriculture standpoint, that research is absolutely critical. Trial and error on the farm is a good way to go broke. And without these folks doing research in our university system, at our land-grant university systems in this particular case, it's a recipe for more consolidation in agriculture, and it's a recipe for less food security. It is the definition of shooting yourself in the foot. It doesn't make any sense. And by the way, if you had a person here in the energy business, they'd be saying the same thing about energy. You've got to have research if you're going to move away from fossil fuels, for example, because you've got to have things that are affordable for people to move into. And without that research, you don't have that. This is absolute insanity.
Yeah, it's not that the current pre-Trump system was perfect. It had a lot of problems in it, but if you want to address those problems, you address those problems. You don't do wholesale, just sort of across the board kinds of things without being really thoughtful about it. But thinking
That's the key term, thoughtful.
Oh, well, thinking takes time.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a worry.
Yeah, and Senator Tester, you're a farmer, and as we know in America, a lot of farmers, they're skating on very, very thin margins, or even somewhere in the red, right? And so you take away this research and and development, and it hurts them even more, right? And so. Yeah, that research, the dollars that go into the research is absolutely critical, unfortunately.
But what you hear out of the administration, whether it's food safety or whether it's research or whether it's taking care of our veterans, we're not going to cut that part. Mm-hmm. But the truth is, if you're going to implement programs, you've got to have people. Otherwise, if you don't have the people do the research doesn't get done. If you don't have if you don't have people to implement the PACT Act, then veterans aren't going to get their benefits in healthcare they need for toxic exposure. And the same thing with food safety. And so it's what Musk has done, what the administration has done, I should say, with not doing firings in a thoughtful way, because I think we all can agree that we should remove any fat that's in government. We should do our best to reduce the debt. But what's going on here ultimately is going to have, I think, the reverse impact, where you're not going to get people to work for the government, where you're going to screw up the research chain, so it'll take years, if not decades, to get those back on track. And the list goes on and on and on.
One of the other platforms for RFK Jr. has been, getting industry and the conflicts of interest out of the FDA, out of our food system.
That would be nice.
Amen, brother.
I mean, can he achieve that? Is he achieving that?
I don't think you can achieve it when you wholesale fire people. Who the hell's going to want to go to work for the government? I mean, the truth is you can achieve that, but there's got to be a future there. There's got to be some job security there. There's got to be a reason to want to go to work for the federal government or the state government or any government.
Right.
So I don't see how you achieve it with the actions that have been done.
Yeah, I worked for the government for 2 years, and I had a very low salary. I had an enormous number of restrictions on what I could do. It was very, very difficult. I thought the job that I was doing was really important and was worth doing. I was doing public service. It meant a lot to me to do that. But if I thought I was coming into something where somebody could arbitrarily, and I moved across country to do it. You know, think about what that's like for the people who moved across country to take those jobs and then got fired.
Yeah.
You think twice.
Right. Yeah, and I agree with Senator Tester. Like, I do think there are areas in government that need to be much more efficient. But you have to make it an attractive place where people want to go work, right? The best and the brightest, should be compensated, and with where the Trump administration is, what they're doing and making really the government not an attractive place to work. Like, that's. I sort of worry. Elon Musk using the Twitter approach, like firing 75% of the staff when he took over. You might be able to do that with one company, but when you're doing that at the government level, it doesn't work. So.
While RFK Jr. doesn't have direct oversight over the school lunch program, the MAHA movement has thoughts, has ideas on how it would like to see changes made there. What's the things that they should be looking at?
They should be giving them more money. Period. End of discussion.
Right.
I mean,
but instead they cut a program. A key program was cut.
Yes,
right?
Seriously, the school meals are the only parts of schools that are expected to be self-supporting. We should have universal school meals so that every kid that goes to school should be offered breakfast and lunch. There are states that are doing this, and that's really good. And we did it during the pandemic, and it was really good during the pandemic. There were lots and lots of research studies that showed what the benefit was to kids' health, to parental health, to families, to family economics. And the school situation is interesting because the same rules apply to all the schools that have federally supported lunches and meals, but the implementation of those rules depends on the school district, but it actually really depends on who's in the school. It's so personal. I've been to lots of schools. I love going to schools and looking at the lunches. And there are two issues, whether the food is edible and whether the kids are eating it. And I've been to all four combinations. Edible foods and the kids eat it, edible foods and the kids don't eat it, and the opposite. Because it depends completely on the interaction of the people in the school with the kids and whether they care about whether the kids are eating it or not. It's just this enormously personal thing. But the one thing that every single school has in common is that it complains that it doesn't have enough money to make healthy food for the kids. Because especially if they're living in big city areas that are expensive, it costs much more. They have to pay the staff. They have to pay the staff, supply the meals, get the equipment, however they do it, they have to do everything out of the Department of Agriculture reimbursement. And that's really tough. Some schools are better at it than others.
But John, one of the programs that was cut was a
Farm to
program.
schools.
Right.
Farm to school, that was a killer.
Well, I mean, it just it doesn't make any sense to cut that program where you could source food locally for the kids to eat. You could teach the kids where the food comes from. You could have them be a part of the process of connecting up the growers with the lunch that you had. It's one of those programs that, quite frankly, was working really well, not only for schools, but for universities too were utilizing it. Everybody, prisons were utilizing it. You didn't have to soak your food in diesel fuel to be able to eat it. It was a ship it halfway around the world is what I'm talking about. So it was a positive thing. I will tell you this, and it's been a long time since I was in elementary school, but I remember sitting down at the plate that was portioned into about 5 different sections and looking at the food going, I hope this food was inspected by the government because I don't think it's fit to eat. The truth of the matter is, and I'll just say, when I was on the school board, which was in the 80s and early 90s, I mean, I thought the lunches were far, far better in that period of time. Maybe it's because I was an adult looking at it instead of a kid looking at it, but I thought they were far more appealing to eat, and I didn't have to ask myself if that hamburger was inspected by the federal government before it was put on my plate, because it didn't look anything like a hamburger.
So Brian, I have a question for you though, regarding foods made for schools. So again, to Miriam's point, what's been going on is that schools have had to reduce salt, sugar in the foods that are served, offer more whole wheat, whole grain products. And a lot of these foods, so I took a tour a couple of years ago with a school system, a rural school system in Arkansas, and they were showing me their pantries, which were Kellogg's, General Mills, large big food companies that were manufacturing cereals, muffins, breakfast bars, whatever, under these lower sugar, lower salt, whole grain regulations. And I was like, so they could do it, but why is this food different than what we get on grocery store shelves?
Sugar sells.
So then the American palate.
Right.
You know, because again, in talking to some of the school lunch administrators in the school of Arkansas, they said the challenge they had is they could make the food, the lunch that fit the requirements, the lower sugar, lower salt or whatever, but that some kids, not all kids, but some kids were less enthusiastic about eating the pizza with whole wheat crust because they could go and have white crust at home, that the same brand of pizza was different because their parent had gotten them at the grocery store and it had higher sugar, higher salt. So their palates were more attuned to those flavors than slightly more blander, slightly less sweet foods that they were being served in schools. So are we really talking about, if we want to make America healthy again, how do we change the American palate at a very young age?
Yeah, so I'll say that there needs to be more innovation and more competition amongst encouraging other businesses to solve this solution. So I don't think the solution is going to the Crafts and the General Mills, and it's like encouraging small businesses and entrepreneurs. And there was someone that I met, one of the students that I met with today. She said her father is a chef, and she was like, I want to pursue entrepreneurship, and she was asking me questions on how to make that happen. We need to encourage that young generation to want to innovate, right? So it's not looking at new types of ingredients so that the kids will want to eat and I think that's really, that's a solution. Even, I travel quite a bit. I travel quite a bit, and I've just been horrified at, even the airplane food. I'm just like, oh my goodness, like this is so bad. Like, why? There has to be a better solution of encouraging other companies to want to serve. Better products on planes. That can happen at the airplane level and in the food service section, and even at schools. We need to encourage entrepreneurship, right? I think that's really what's gonna change and move the needle medium and longer term.
Right.
Well, I mean, as you guys can probably tell, I haven't been through a lot of famines in my life. But I do remember when my mom brought home a whole grain loaf of bread. I thought it was great. I mean, I thought it was much better. It actually had taste. You just didn't taste the jam and the butter. You could actually taste the bread. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the same case, my opinion, okay? It's the same case with the pizza. If you can actually taste that bread, yeah. I mean, isn't that why you buy food? Is because you want it to taste, good? And so I think a good part of it is marketing. You said a minute ago that sugar sells. That's why it's in the food. Well, let's think outside the box and let's market some of the stuff that we don't normally market by talking about, its benefits.
Right.
Yeah, I think you've got to teach kids how to grow food.
Yeah.
And
I agree with you.
Even if it's in pots, it's just, I've seen it in New York where I live. I went to a school in Harlem where they had these big containers and the kids were growing vegetables and they were eating salads.
Yep.
Teenage kids, they were eating salads.
Amazing.
It was amazing to watch.
And then they had the peer pressure of the other kids that didn't like salads. Pretty soon they were eating salads too.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because we were all at lunch and there was a kid sitting across from me like this. He was not going to touch that salad. And another kid came up and said, "Are you going to eat your salad? Can I have your salad?" I thought, this program is a smashing success.
But I think for a lot of families, again, getting back to something we talked about in the beginning also, and I talk to a lot of organic and natural food companies, and when I go through the grocery store aisle, let's say, of the cereals or of breads, the highly processed foods are the least expensive,
yeah.
The ones that have the natural flavors, the watermelon juice, the carrot juice, the this, that, they cost $1, sometimes more, so how do we...
And is the reason it costs more because of the lower volume that's being sold, or because there's actually more money put? I mean, I know what they get for a bushel of organic wheat. I mean, you could put a lot of damn wheat in that bag and still not raise the price much. You know
Right.
what I mean? So I don't know why it has to be that way.
I don't know, Brian, is it a mix of volume for like organic
Economies
foods? Why
of
are
scale.
so many of the organic foods significantly more than?
It's pure economics,
Yeah.
right? At the end of the day, it's supply demand, and more supply, it lowers the cost.
Right.
You
Right.
know.
We
Right.
better do some Q&A. They're starting to harp at us here on this.
Oh, okay.
We're getting
Let's do some
We're getting
Q&A.
marching orders.
Would love. Okay, let's open it up. I want to hear some questions from you guys.
Hi, I'm Luke Johnson. I'm a student in the Precision Health Master's Program here, an alum of the college. Dr. Nestle, I was curious to hear more about your thoughts on, you mentioned wanting more labels or different labels on packages, and curious to hear more about that. Senator Tester, Mr. Choi, if you have any other ideas as well, I'd love to hear that as well.
Well, I think we should copy what's going on in Latin America and put warning labels on foods. I think it would be helpful. Because, one of the reasons why they did it was there are a lot of people who can't read, but they know what these warning labels are, and little kids can point at them and say, we're not allowed to have those in schools. And the sales of them are down. Oh dear. Oh dear.
From my perspective, I think informed consumer is a very, very good thing. So you might as well inform them. And I think if you're able to do that, then they know what the hell they're buying.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Thomas. I'm a freshman in the college from Allen, Texas, which is a neighboring city of Plano, which is interestingly cited as the fast food capital of the United States. Interestingly, though, it is also one of the healthiest, ranked as having one of the best life expectancies in the United States at the same time. So I'm wondering, how much is the MAHA movement dependent on regulation of the FDA and the food industry? And how much is this really just an American cultural problem of portion control? And yeah, that's really all I have.
Well, it's certainly a matter of portion control. I mean, my hypothesis for why the prevalence of obesity rose so rapidly between 1980 and 2000 is because portion sizes increased so dramatically during those years. And I have lots of evidence for that. You know, if I had one nutritional concept to get across to the American people, I can't even say it with a straight face. Larger portions have more calories. It's not intuitively obvious. You've got one of those muffins in front of you, you're gonna eat the muffin whether it's this big or that big. And yeah, it's a huge problem.
So you're saying I got to cut back on my celery? No, but no, portion size, celery portions did not get larger. I know.
Yeah, and I would add it's not just the portion control; it's physical activity as well, right? Like I was reading this statistic that said the average American spends 6 to 7 hours per day in front of a screen. That wasn't the case 15, 20 years ago,
Wasn't
right?
the case 10 years ago.
Or even 10 years ago, right? And so you have a generation now that's like basically glued to their iPhones or Androids, and they're not playing sports, they're not going out, right? And the pandemic has even made it worse, right? It's kind of normalized kind of being at home and vegging and just watching screens. So I think it's portion control and it's physical activity.
Kids are like chickens in CAFOs. They're too scared to go out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Carter. I'm a second year in the college. One huge problem is lack of accessibility of healthy foods, especially in rural areas. A lot of small towns near where I'm from in West Virginia only have like dollar stores as their grocery stores. That's where people get all their food. And obviously there's not really a lot of healthy options at the dollar store. And so how do we bring healthy food to small towns, to rural areas?
I can start off here. I think there are a lot of companies that are addressing this issue, right? There are companies. I think the name is called Farm Box, where they will put delicious, healthy food in a box and they'll mail it, right? So there are companies like that providing that supply of healthy food. I think number two is I don't think there's enough attention, like media attention, that focuses on this issue, right? And so I think that awareness will help incentivize companies that will come to the area and provide even more solutions to that. So I think innovation is one answer to that.
Yeah, one possibility is community organizing, where you organize vast numbers of people in the community to say that they're going to support some company that comes in. And there are lots of examples of this. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I'm impressed, I'm an urban person, and I'm impressed that large supermarkets will not go into inner city areas where there is not a very large population of educated people who are making more than $100,000 a year. That seems to be the cut point for where Trader Joe's will go or where some of these other places will go. So this is a huge social problem. And what this means is that communities have to give incentives to grocery stores to move in. I'm just very impressed at how quickly they move out if they don't like the kinds of sales they're getting.
Yeah.
I would also add to that, being from a town of 600, that consumers usually the boss, and if you get enough people walking into that small grocery store like is in our small town and saying, look, if you bring some organic milk in, we'll buy it.
Yeah.
They'll do it. And you can do the same thing with vegetables. But the consumers, they're not going to put it on the shelf if the consumers
Right.
don't buy it. And they're small, they're hanging by their fingernails like most small businesses are, and so consequently it takes some community action, some commitment.
Community organizing.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's the solution to everything.
And teaching people how to farm, right? Like, I think that's the biggest solution. You know, not only relying upon the grocery stores and others, like, you know, teaching kids how to farm, you know, grow their own food, right? It's our own version of victory gardens. You know, I think that's a huge, there you go.
Thank you.
Hi again. I come from a family of farmers in Ecuador, and so I can attest to the labels on all the food. There's like bright red labels on everything you buy that say like, this is really high in sugar or this is really high in fat. But obviously, as you can imagine, a lot of corporations aren't exactly happy about that and have like lobbied a lot, at least in Ecuador, to get rid of those. And so I was wondering, like, what kind of efforts do you see necessary in order to like create labels for the US? And like, do you think those would be effective? And also, how do you see corporations, or how do you think corporations would try to like get around those labels and still keep high sales?
Well, I can tell you how they're getting around them in Mexico City, because I went to a Walmart there, and the Coca-Cola company pays the people who stocks the shelves to stock the bottles of Coca-Cola so the warning labels are hidden. And the companies that are making breakfast cereals that are high in sugar have substituted artificial sweeteners. So if there's too much sugar in the package, if they have warning labels on the package, they can't have cartoons on the package. But I saw lots of cereals with cartoons because they had substituted artificial sweeteners. But then the states put in a rule that you have to label it if there's an artificial sweetener, but they listed the sweeteners that needed to be labeled, so the food companies found another one that wasn't in the list, and the cartoons are still on there. There are lots and lots of ways of getting around it. I don't see it in the United States. I just don't see it happening. Unless somebody is willing to take on the food industry big time, because the food industry isn't gonna like it. They're really not.
There's a lot of money behind those companies.
Oh, yeah, huge amounts, huge amounts. And they pay lobbyists.
Yeah.
The problem with being an advocate is getting paid to do lobbying. It's a big problem.
Next question?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for being here today. My name is Adam. I'm a third year in the college. And as you were talking about reformulation and the challenge that that might pose for adapting to new regulations in the US, I become skeptical that the big food companies that are multinational, that are selling to consumers already in Latin America and in Europe, really have to do so much reformulation research if they're already conforming and complying to those regulations elsewhere. So I wonder if you, in your work, have heard advocates kind of express this kind of skepticism towards companies that perhaps it's actually not that big of a financial burden to make the switch because that technology, that food science has already been done for more stringent markets abroad.
Yeah, I'm working on a book about food policy told through cereal boxes. So, it's so much fun. I've collected a huge number of cereal boxes from all over the world, and I can tell you that the ingredients are different in different countries depending on what the rules are. But the people who care about the concept of ultra-processed foods say that the reformulation doesn't change the foods. They're still ultra-processed, which is one of the reasons why food companies are so opposed to the concept, because it doesn't leave them any room for reform. The food companies would love to be able to reformulate their way out of a lot of these things, and they certainly have the technology to do it. And the great thing about cereals is they change the boxes several times a year, so they could do it quickly. And that's why I expect to see the color additives out very quickly. I can't wait to buy my first one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Grace, and I'm a second year in the college, and I was just wondering, like, your opinions on, like, RFK and, like, others, like, stance to, like, limit, like, the kinds of food that SNAP benefits and other, like, federally, like, subsidized, like, programs can buy, because some people, you know, may not have access to, like, cooking food all of the time and storing it.
No, I'll just say it. You know, I'm a big proponent. I think it makes a lot of sense, right? You restrict access, you know, to the ultra processed foods, and I think there'll be a lot of pushback, you know, with consumers and consumer choice. But I think it makes a lot of sense. I think I'm a big proponent of that.
I think the main issue is sugar-sweetened beverages, which are sugars and waters and have no nutritional value. That's kind of an easy target for that. It's a hugely fraught issue that brings in political alliances that are sometimes very surprising. I've argued for years for pilot studies, because when I wrote my book, Soda Politics, I got letters from SNAP recipients saying, we'd be happy to have the sodas, you know, out of SNAP. We'd buy them with our own money. We probably wouldn't buy as many, and that would be good for us. And I thought, okay, let's try this. Let's have a pilot project. Let's see how SNAP recipients feel about it. What is it really doing? Does it reduce purchases? What's going on? Let's get some researcher to analyze what it will look like. But the Department of Agriculture has always turned down any requests for waivers of the rules. And now the Secretary of Agriculture is saying, well, maybe she'll consider waivers. So we'll see. They'll do some pilot projects. States are asking for it. And we'll see what happens.
I think the pilot project idea is exactly where you need to go. And that way you find out what the definite impacts are. You're not guessing.
Yeah.
And you also find out who's opposed to it, real people who are opposed to it versus those who aren't.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Thank you.
I think that's it for us today. I want to thank everybody for their questions, and I want to thank the panel. This was so much fun. Thanks, guys, for being here today with us, and thanks for our online audience joining us.